Come for a little walk with me from here, and then let's go here for a bit. And my walk is taking me to something called the Edinburgh Fringe in the city called Edinburgh. And you might find, if you have a show at the Edinburgh Fringe, or if you're on your way into Edinburgh to go and see some shows today or any other day throughout the whole of August, this particular Fringe this year runs right till the very end, to the 31st of August. You might be looking for a Fringe show, or you might be in a Fringe show, but you're actually in two very different Fringes. And when I was walking around quite last night, having the usual pleasure every so often, every year, of walking somebody around the Fringe who's new to it, either as a punter who's a friend, or somebody doing a show who wants to get a real sense of it. We walk around, look at all the big venue hubs, and no matter how big a venue is, we find Fringe and Fringe. Sometimes I spell them with a capital F and a small f, and you might want to locate yourself in one or two, and you might notice my own preference. And this is fringing the city of Edinburgh. It's beautiful landscape, and I call it the real Fringe, right on the edges of a big noisy city. I'm not quite sure if this city's in drought like the rest of the country at the moment. So capital F is the name. It's often spelt with a capital E and a capital F up here. It's the Edinburgh Fringe. It's governed or stewarded by something called the Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society, with quite famous supporters and patrons. And it's something that has its origin in a small f, and would claim that it still somehow holds space for the small f. Fringe and Fringe. The big F, the capital F, is a corporation, is a business, at least operating like one. Its very largest venues claim the name, have their own names too up here. Gilded Balloon, Assembly, Pleasance, Underbelly, with slightly smaller venue hubs. Actually one perhaps even bigger now, the Space, Zoo venues, Just the Tonic, then even smaller venues. I was at the press launch for the Bedlam, which only has about a dozen shows I think this year, maybe slightly more. But the big F is now mainstream. It has an origin story where it did what I believe is the healthy and necessary thing that the small f needs, which is to be the fringe, the genuine fringe, the reaction to a mainstream. And the mainstream might have become elitist. It could have become mediocre and safe as it institutionalises, but it could also just be quite expensive and in some ways limited too. And the origin story of things like the Edinburgh Fringe and other fringes around the country, in my own city at Brighton Fringe, began life as, let's use words like disgruntled, reactive, trying to create affordability and accessibility for those who feel excluded from the mainstream, which sometimes becomes middle or upper class. And so when mainstreams exist and they institutionalise and they don't change, or they become limited to a smaller group of people, the fringe sets up, often initially free, affordable, with freer principles, open access rather than curated. Although quite a few fringe festivals in the world now have become curated, but the idea of fringe is it's edgy, it's on the edge, and it's necessary to poke a stick at the dangers of mainstreaming. Up here with, I think it's around 4,000 shows and a history now spanning 80 years or more, it's not surprising that fringes become victims of their own success and they grow. And then the word fringe with a small f, fringy, fringe spirit, the name that was attached to it, Edinburgh Fringe, which you can even protect and not let other people use it, becomes the mainstream itself, often bigger than the original festival or event or movement that it was set up or emerged or evolved to be a fringe on. So up here, the Edinburgh International Festival, which the Edinburgh Fringe was set up to be a fringe on, now is much, much smaller, at least in terms of audience numbers, to the main Edinburgh Festival Fringe itself. And you'll notice that word, Edinburgh Festival Fringe. Not all fringes have the word festival in them, and not all fringe festivals around the country were ever fringes on anything. And they were set up to encourage, through open access, fringy work, edgy work. So as I walked around Edinburgh last night, I saw very, very big posters. They're 6 foot, some of them are huge, and they are part of a main festival that happens to have the name of Edinburgh Fringe. They are mainstream. And you notice with some of the comedians and bigger acts, they might only be playing 3 or 4 nights, aiming to sell out as they just continue on their tour, and they just are using Edinburgh Fringe as part of that stop-off because there's money to be made. And there are tour bookers and people that might book them up here. But in the mean streets, on the edges, in the shadows, are much, much smaller venues, and they are the fringe venues. And if you look at the work, it's not all great for any stretch of the imagination, but it's smaller scale. People, particularly in the free fringe, are trying to do it in an affordable way. Anyone can come up here and have a go, and that's fringe with a small f. But what is interesting is just the nature of the media. Is it doesn't mean that's all fringe with a small f, and there could be a very, very tiny show on the edge of town that's simply doing very non-fringy work that might just be very derivative. It might just be a bit of fun, and it might simply be the sort of thing with a smaller poster of just some impersonation, stand-up comedy that's not really pushing itself, that's not really on the edge of anything, which make things even more complicated. So one answer to that might just be to stop talking about it and just enjoy this monster up here for what it is. But the other one is it just gives a clue, I think, to how you might sell your show, or how you might choose what shows to see if you're a member of the audience, if you're still interested in slightly more pure idea of fringe spirit, and whether it's a 6 foot poster or just a small flyer or just somebody talking to you on the street, is just to look for work that is edgy, that is experimental, that is trying something different, that is a bit disgruntled with the current political state, that's going to make you feel uncomfortable, that's asking questions that no one else asks, that's trying to disrupt, irritate, or celebrate just in a different way, draw your attention to something you wouldn't normally think of, make you genuinely say wow, make you think a bit differently, and that the people making it might be disrupting themselves with experimentation. And you might just notice that those shows are more affordable to get in, that no one is turned away. And then I think you recover fringe spirit, but you also get the chance to think about your own work and why you brought it here, and to see what is fringy about it, whether you are a stand-up comedian with a 6 foot poster, or whether you're here for the first time with something you've never tried before. And actually I think there's enough people, I was noticing walking around and what flyers they're taking and what posters they're stopping at, that clearly there's a very large number of people that just want to have a laugh, have fun, be entertained, because that's what the mainstream festival is here, called Edinburgh Fringe. But if you can find any aspects of your own show that you think they meet the criteria of being that original smaller F fringe, there are enough people out there, I noticed, that are up for seeing that and just that. And then what you have is your own experience up here of saying, I was in a real fringe. So I'm not necessarily criticising capital F fringe, but I am celebrating and reminding us that society always benefits from people poking from the outside. And that might just be the way that you now, the fringe is a few hours old, a few days old really in terms of the whole month. That might just be the best way to sell your show. Have a good day.